Hey, gang, you know what I have in my hand? It may look like an iPhone, but Shazam! It is a casino. It is the new BetParks app, digital casino and sportsbook. It's the only casino and sportsbook app that I recommend. Live in game betting. You can bet all your favorite sports and play all your favorite casino games for real money. I'm thinking of laying $100 on Philadelphia right now to win the Super Bowl next. What would that be? February, when, according to today's odds, I can collect 3 grand. It's a lot of fun. Bet with your head, not over it. Download on the App Store, Google Play Store, or at betparks.com. Got to be 21 and in Pennsylvania or New Jersey. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Time now for the headlines from Smerconish.com, the newsletter. I have told you all that come September, we are relaunching Smerconish.com, the website. The newsletter is awesome. I so appreciate the comments that we get, people who know how much effort goes into the selection of the links and the production of the daily newsletter. We think, frankly, that the website needs to up its game, and that's coming in September. I bring it up today because I'm not sure if I'll do this, but I'm contemplating adding a new feature, which is the must read of the day or Michael's favorite read of the day, because I find that each and every day there's like one item in particular among the 20 that I put forth that I really hope people will take the time to check out. So if there were such a feature today at Smerconish.com, it would be this story from the Washington Post. It's a several person byline. Michael Scher leads the coverage. And the headline is this: historians privately warn Biden that America's democracy is teetering. I really like this. I don't like that America's democracy is teetering, obviously. What I like is that the president is regularly bringing in smart people to give him advice and guidance and talk about big picture issues. So, for example, Bill Clinton recently came in, had dinner with the president to talk to him about inflation. Then there was a gathering, I find this really fascinating, relative to Ukraine, where joining the president in the East Room, diplomat Richard Haas, former diplomat, journalist Fareed Zakaria. Fareed's a smart guy. I like that. Ian Bremmer, the former National Security Council advisor, Fiona Hill. And this impresses me greatly. Retired Admiral James Stavridis, frequent guest of mine here on POTUS, frequent guest of mine on CNN as well. James Stavridis is, of course, the former Supreme Allied Commander of NATO. So those are some of the recent meetings, but the one that causes the headline, which says they're warning the president that democracy is teetering, it occurred on August 4, this gathering. It included the following: Biden's occasional speechwriter, John Meacham, journalist Annie Applebaum, Princeton professor Sean Wilentz, University of Virginia historian Alita Black, and presidential historian Michael Beschloss. By the way, a little footnote here that's well, it's sad and I don't know. I don't even quite know how to describe it. You remember the story about 3 people dying from a lightning strike in Lafayette Park, Lafayette Square, immediately across from the White House? And I said, I'm always in Washington walking through Lafayette Square. It says, during the discussion, a loud crack of thunder could be heard, which the participants later found out coincided with the lightning strike that killed 3 people in Lafayette Square. So right at that moment, the president is having this meeting with this gathering of historians, and all of them have a very ominous view of where we are. Quote, most of the experts in attendance have been outspoken in recent months about the threat they see to the American democratic project after the attack on the Capitol on January 6th, the continued denial by some Republicans of the 2020 election result, and the efforts of election deniers to seek state office. And then it goes on to describe what each of those historians gathered with the president has recently written on this subject. I won't read that all to you, but it says some of last week's discussion focused on similarities between today's landscape and the period leading up to World War II, when growing authoritarianism abroad found its disturbing echo in the United States. And then it said, Biden continues to bring up such themes in his public speeches, most recently in a July address to a law enforcement group where he criticized Trump for taking no immediate action as the rioters had inspired the attack on the U.S. Capitol in an effort to overturn the results. Said President Biden, "You can't be pro-insurrection and pro-democracy. You can't be pro-insurrection and pro-American." And I, of course, agree with those sentiments, and I highly recommend this piece in the Washington Post. And of course, it's posted at Smerconish.com and is in today's newsletter. Yesterday, 12,687 votes. A lot of votes were cast. If the Mar-a-Lago search was only about presidential records, it will be viewed as political and undermine any future investigation. And I told you yesterday that those are the words of former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo. I wanted to know, do you agree or disagree? 53.08% said they disagreed. 46.92, let's call it 53-47, 47%, so a pretty close margin, agree with Governor Cuomo. What's new on the whole January 6th, on the Mar-a-Lago raid, search, whatever you want to call it? I went today at Smerconish.com with the Wall Street Journal coverage because the Journal has some new insights. I'm going to read to you exactly how the Journal characterizes the lead up to the execution of that search warrant. It says around lunchtime on June 3rd, a senior Justice Department national security supervisor and 3 FBI agents arrived at former President Trump's Mar-a-Lago home in Florida to discuss boxes with government records sitting in a basement storage room, along with suits, sweaters, and golf shoes. Sounds like my basement. A few days later, the FBI sent a note asking that a stronger lock be installed on the storage room door, signing off, "Thank you, very truly yours, Jay Bratt, Chief of Counterintelligence and Export Control Section." In the following weeks, however, someone familiar with the stored papers told investigators there may be still more classified documents at the private club after the National Archives retrieved 15 boxes earlier in the year. People familiar with the matter said. Did you catch that? In the following weeks, someone familiar with the stored papers told investigators there may be still more classified So in other words, according to the Wall Street Journal today, someone within the Trump orbit tipped off the feds that there were yet more documents. And that apparently is what spurred the execution of the search warrant. Other analyses on this issue that I think are worthy and that I linked to at the website, put in the daily newsletter. David French, writing in The Atlantic, headline, "Trump will release the warrant." Remember now, I explained this yesterday and the day before. There was an affidavit, there was an application given to a federal magistrate judge that then led to the issuance of the warrant. There'd be more detail from the Fed perspective in the application, in the affidavit, than there would be in the warrant. And Trump and his lawyers would not have access to the affidavit, the application, but they would have the warrant. So this is David French addressing the question of why won't Trump release the warrant? And much like I said here on POTUS yesterday, he won't release it because this is all going so well for him. He's so rallying his base around this now. Why diminish it by producing the warrant, which might have something in it that's embarrassing to him? Says David French, the reason is obvious. Holding on to the warrant might be bad for the country, leaving us largely in the dark, fighting furiously over hypotheticals. But for now, it's very good for Trump. And then he goes on to flesh that out and explain in more detail why he believes it to be the case. I agree with that. I said it here yesterday. In other developments regarding Trump, it's amazing to me. He's been out of office, 2 years? And today, in determining the 20 links that I hand select that would go in the daily newsletter, I couldn't help but make about 7 of them Trump focused, because so much of today's news cycle is still being driven by him. Here's another example from the New York Times. Seizure of congressman's phone is the latest sign of escalating election inquiry. This is all about Pennsylvania Representative Scott Perry, who he said 3 FBI agents approached him when he was in the company of his family and they seized his cell phone. What's that all about? Apparently, it's all about those efforts in Pennsylvania and elsewhere to have alternative slates of electors. And I highly recommend, if you've not heard it, if you didn't hear it in real time, and it's long, it's like a 45-minute interview, but we released as one of my daily podcast features, my interview with Bruce Marks, a Philadelphia-based attorney who himself in the early 90s really was the victim of election fraud. So much so that a federal judge overturned the outcome of an election and seated him in the Pennsylvania State Senate. The focus of our conversation that day was the Pennsylvania effort to establish an alternative slate of electors. And Bruce, by the way, you'll hear in the interview, distinguishes Pennsylvania from other states insofar as Pennsylvania's electors were going to kick in only if there'd been a court determination that invalidated a Biden victory. But I bring that up just to jog everybody's memory and let you know that it's a really informative interview that I think you'll learn a great deal. So now, what are we learning today? We're learning today that the U.S. Attorney's Office in Washington, a prosecutor by the name of Thomas Wyndham, is in charge of a broad investigation of a plan by Trump and his allies to create, quote, fake slates of electors to the Electoral College in states that were actually won by Biden. And apparently, that investigation, as of today, is extending into the Pennsylvania State House. Now, of course, the speculation, the wonderment, the question that many have is this related to the execution of the search warrant at Mar-a-Lago? So far, it appears not to be the case. But of course, many people think there's more to it than just, boxes that shouldn't have been stored, albeit with classified information, at the former president's residence. So I'm giving you all this because maybe in the end, we're going to find out that it's all directly connected. Here's another Trump story that I have to share with you. Yesterday, in front of the New York Attorney General office in this civil investigation pertaining to allegations that Trump inflated the valuation of his businesses, he did what he once said only mob bosses do, and that is he pled the fifth. In the newsletter today, at the website today, Danny Savalos, the NBC legal analyst, frequent guest here on this program, who has guest hosted this program, he writes an op-ed that I thought was worthy, explaining that Trump was right to plead the Fifth Amendment, that from a legal perspective, he should do it. Quote, it was the right move to make with legal troubles mounting. He should plead the Fifth often. The Fifth Amendment to the Constitution grants a person the privilege not to answer questions in a civil proceeding like a deposition if the answers might incriminate the person in future criminal proceedings. And Danny goes on to correctly point out that the downside for Trump in pleading the Fifth is not only a public perception, but New York allows, so too would Pennsylvania, an adverse inference to be drawn in the context of that civil probe when someone pleads the Fifth Amendment. So in a criminal proceeding, it can't be used against you. A jury is expressly instructed not to use against a defendant the fact that they didn't take the stand. They have no obligation to take the stand. The burden is on the prosecution. A little different in the civil realm. In the civil realm, it can come back to bite you. Okay, today's poll question at Smerconish.com. Do you support, can't wait to see how this turns out. Do you support that part of the Inflation Reduction Act that will give the IRS $45.6 billion for enforcement? Story today that I recommend you check out. We went with the coverage from Town Hall. It's picked up in the conservative outlets. Look, I like to give you something from the left and something from the right. And every day we give you ground news, which tells you what the left and the right are ignoring, because the mission, the objective is balance delivered daily. So I tell you, this is coming from the conservative outlets are all over this and not the progressive ones, but the IRS in advertising for a new special agent position has removed an ad, but screenshots, of course, were taken. If you read the print, it says you've got to be open to working on weekends and other, rudimentary line items of federal employment. But where people were surprised is it also said that one must be comfortable carrying a firearm and, if necessary, using deadly force. You can imagine how that plays on the right, where there are already concerns about government overreach and the beefing up of the FBI, and who will they really be looking at. Financial news, if it were headed in the other direction, no, I don't want to say it that way. When it was headed in the other direction, we were all over it. So I got to make sure when it's now headed in a better direction, we are noting it as well. What am I talking about? Gas prices. Gas prices dropped under $4 nationwide for the first time in months yesterday. The average cost of a gallon of regular gasoline in the U.S., $3.99, according to the AAA. President Biden was blamed when it was $5 a gallon. Here's what I'm saying. If you blamed Biden when gas was $5 a gallon, then you got to give him credit when it's $3.99. If you didn't blame him because you said, hey, a president can only control so much, it's like the stock market, is it really fair to blame a president for that? Then don't worry about it. But for consistency, if you blamed him then you've got to give him credit now. Pew Research, I posted the study itself at Smerconish.com, new analyses of teens and social media and technology. Bottom line, they're all dialed in way too much. And I thought this was really interesting. Teens between the ages of 13 and 17, the data shows that Facebook use has plummeted from 71% of teens in 2014 and 15 to 32% in 2022. What's happened? Have they all turned off their devices? No, they haven't. They've just gone to TikTok. Gerald Posner, another frequent guest of the program, has an interesting piece at Forbes. In any other news cycle, this would be a big story, trying to understand when President Ashraf Ghani and his top aides fled Afghanistan on a fleet of 4 helicopters in August of last year, a year ago right now. In fact, I think we're 4 days away from the anniversary of the withdrawal from Afghanistan. So go back into that period of time. Gerald Posner at Forbes today is trying to understand how much money did he take with him. And he talks about a report from the U.S. Office of Special Investigator General for Afghanistan, SIGAR, SIGAR is what it's called. It comes to no clear conclusion, but it sure does leave an inference that maybe a boatload of American cash was on board with the Afghan president when he fled. Other world news from the BBC. Yeah, all of this is at Smerconish.com. Can you imagine the amount of time I had to spend? Roger Waters would scold me, but can you imagine the amount of time that I had to spend to read all of these stories and more and decide what am I going to put in the newsletter? But that's how serious I am about the newsletter. Anyway, from the BBC today, like a really troublesome story about Iran and Iranian women needing literally a certification of their status as virgins. After getting engaged, says the story, many women go to a doctor after getting engaged and get a test proving that they've never had sex. According to the WHO, virginity testing has no scientific merit. And I'll finish with this. I'm staying on top of, as best I can, the controversy at Sesame Place. You remember the character Rosita and the mother of 2 black daughters. Actually, maybe one was a cousin, but they claimed, and they had film footage that they said supported this, a 9-second clip, kind of a Rorschach test. But they said that the character had avoided the girls and they believed it was racially motivated. So the update is that now Rosita has been canceled. Like, the character is no more at Sesame Place, where everybody is now going to get diversity training. The question that I ask, though, has the individual who was in the uniform been fired? And nowhere can I read that that individual was fired. Well, which is it? Because if you really, I mean, I get it. Sesame Place has a PR nightmare on their hands, but you can't have it both ways logically. If you are Sesame Place and you believe that the person, the employee who was in the Rosita uniform, that if they did something that was racist, then what do? You fire them, you get rid of the Rosita character, and you give everybody diversity training. But if you give everybody diversity training and you get rid of the character, but you didn't fire the person, then what are we to conclude? I think what we are to conclude is that they don't really believe the person did it from a racial bias standpoint, but to salve their PR issues, then this is what they need to do. Then they need to put on the best face. All right. Well, thank you so much for listening to today's program. Thank you if you watched on YouTube. Become a subscriber of my YouTube channel if you want to watch the daily newsletter cast. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for everything. How's that? Have a wonderful day. Go vote on the poll question of the day about the IRS at Smerconish.com. See ya.